Emotions are meant to be felt. It's just that simple. Notice them, feel them, process them, and learn from them. It's what we're meant to do, but actually going through that process is difficult. It's messy and it's uncomfortable. But for some reason, there's this notion that it's not proper or helpful to feel emotions. So we stuff them back down and soldier on, building thick armor against anything that may threaten to expose that inner turmoil. But that has consequences, emotional, physical, and mental consequences. In this video, we're going to do some myth busting on why it's helpful and healthy to feel emotions. And I give 3 tips on how to recognize your emotions for what they are. Hey there, my name is Laura, founder of Hope Made Strong, where we equip you and your ministry team to support and care for others. Emotions rise up inside of us whether we like it or not. They happen even though we might not understand them, know where they came from, or be able to name them. I've created a download that may help you name emotions, which is often difficult for people. If it's not happy, sad, angry, people can struggle with being able to identify or name their emotions. But more on that in a minute. In the show notes below, make sure to grab that free emotions vocabulary chart. Feelings or intuition, inner voice, conscious, call it what you like, you have been created to feel. There are many examples in the Bible where it talks about feeling emotions. There are specific verses on anger, joy, fear, and there's a whole book called Lamentations. And to lament is to express deep regret, grief, or sorrow. We have been precisely created in the image of God, and having emotions is a part of that perfect creation. It is cultural influences that have brought shame on expressing or feeling emotions. And the Western Church has been among these cultures. We have shifted from the biblical example of recognizing emotions, feeling them, and tending to your needs, bringing them to God to process and learn from them, to stifling them down, shaming them, and calling them sin. A favorite scripture of mine is Matthew 11:28-30, where it says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I find it interesting that the first step in this scripture is assessing if you're weary and burdened, recognizing your emotions, self-reflecting if you're weary and heavy burdened. The second step is to get rest. It's not described as self-pity, but compassionately tending to your needs. The third is to take on the perspective or the yoke of Christ and learn from him, processing what you're feeling in light of the scriptures and discovering what and who the scripture says you are. This method results in rest and peace, described as easy and light. This process first begins with self-reflection and recognizing our emotions. How many times have you felt something but smothered it? Your gut instincts told you something, whether it's you're tired, sad, or grieving, but you pushed it aside. Silencing emotions has consequences. We do this in the name of duty and in strength. How many times have you thought, "Oh, I don't have time for this," and down it goes? Or "There's others depending on me and I can't go there right now." Over and over, we suppress emotions, and the results are exhaustion, sleepless nights, headaches, high blood pressure, conflict in relationships, anger, and resentment. It could be months, years, or even decades of silencing emotions, and they boil over into our relationships, impact our physical health and our mental well-being, and we're left wondering where it all came from. So here are 3 tips for recognizing emotions. Tip number 1, we often experience emotions along with a physical response. Think of those butterflies in your stomach or the tightening of your chest. These are just a physical response of the internal emotions that you're feeling. So pick a time every day to reflect back on that day and consider what physical responses you experienced. A good time to reflect would be during your commute to and from work or on your lunch break. And feel free to use that emotions vocabulary chart to consider what your emotions might be underlying that physical response. Tip number 2 is if building a vocabulary is too big of a step, try using colors. I often recommend using a simple green, yellow, and red scale. When you're in the green zone, you're feeling good, you're positive, and you're energized. Yellow is when stress is building. You might be struggling with deadlines, responsibilities, pressures, but you're able to manage. And we all know what the red zone feels like. You're no longer managing well, and you're in crisis mode. You're not coping, and things are starting to fall apart. Using the scale, it is easier to identify with where you're at. In your calendar or in your journal, make it a habit to consider where you're at in that day. You can be in the green, red, or even yellow zone all in one day, but by reflecting on where you are at, you're able to recognize the feelings that come along with each of these areas. Then you're able to reflect with these and consider and bring them to God and with your time with Him. Tip number 3 is micro moments. As a counselor, I remember going from back-to-back meetings supporting people who were suffering. There was barely enough time to eat and go to the restroom, let alone going and doing some self-reflection. A strategy that I began to use allowed me micro moments of self-reflection, and it was deep breathing. I know it sounds cheesy, but hear me out. Every time I went through a door to a meeting or back to my office, I would first take a deep breath in, reflecting on my feelings, and then a long, slow exhale, imagining that I'm giving what is inside back to God. A deep breath in of reflection and a long back out, giving it to the Lord. The breathing refreshed my physical body, and the reflection helped me recognize my feelings and give them over to God. Having these micro moments of reflection at times in transition is a great way to give space for your emotions all throughout your day. For generations, we have been taught to suppress and silence our emotions, and as a result, we're seeing the negative impacts in our physical health, our mental well-being, and even in our relationships. Use these 3 strategies and the free download tool and follow what we learn in Matthew 11, where we are to number 1, assess if we're weary and heavy burdened, 2, find rest and tend to our needs, and 3, learn from Christ as we take our emotions to Him. If you have found this video helpful and want to be notified when a new video goes live, make sure you push that subscribe button. Thanks for connecting. Take care.